Hello everyone, welcome to today's live session. Today we will be learning about the making of nationalism in Europe. So, first we can look what's the meaning of this making of nationalism in Europe through ChatGPT. The making of nationalism in Europe, complete explanation. Europe before nation states. In the mid 18th century, Europe did not have nation states like we see today. A nation state is a country where people share a common identity, culture, language, and political system. At that time, Germany, Italy, and Switzerland did not exist as unified countries. They were divided into many kingdoms, duchies, and cantons. Each territory was ruled independently by its own ruler. Eastern and Central Europe. Eastern and Central Europe were controlled by autocratic monarchies, that is, rulers with absolute power. Inside these empires lived many different groups of people. These people were these people did not think of themselves as one nation, did not share a common identity, often spoke different languages, belonged to different ethnic groups, had different cultures and traditions. Therefore, there was little sense of political unity. The Habsburg Empire, a good example. The Habsburg Empire ruled over Austria Hungary. It was a patchwork empire, meaning it contained many different regions and peoples. Regions included Alpine regions that include Tyrol, Austria, Sudetenland, etc., and Bohemia. The aristocracy or nobility mainly spoke German, and Italian speaking provinces, that is, Lombardy and Venetia. Languages spoken in the empire are Hungary, half of the population spoke Magyar and other half spoke various dialects. And Galicia, the aristocracy spoke Polish. Other groups living in the empire, besides the three dominant groups, that is German, Magyar, and Polish, many peasant communities also lived there. In the north, there lived Bohemians and Slovaks, and in the Carniola region, Slovenes were there, and in the south, Croats were there, and in Transylvania, Romanians are there. Why political unity was difficult? Because people spoke different languages, belonged to different ethnic groups, had different cultures and traditions. These differences did not promote political unity. People felt closer to their own community than to the empire as a whole. What held the empire together? The only thing that united all these diverse groups was a common allegiance or loyalty to the emperor. They obeyed the same ruler even though they differed in language, culture, and ethnicity. Mid 18th century Europe had no nation states. Germany, Italy, and Switzerland were divided into many small states. Eastern and Central Europe were ruled by autocratic monarchies, and people spoke different languages and belonged to different ethnic groups. The Habsburg Empire, Austria-Hungary, contained many regions and peoples. Example, Alpine region contains Tyrol, Austria, and Sudetenland. Bohemia contained German-speaking aristocracy, and in Lombardy and Venetia, Italian-speaking provinces were there, and in Hungary, Magyar plus various dialects were there. Galicia, Polish speaking aristocracy. Other groups are Bohemians, Slovaks, Slovenes, Croats, and Romanians. Differences prevented political unity. The only common bond was loyalty to the emperor. Why was the Habsburg Empire called a patchwork empire? The Habsburg Empire was called a patchwork empire because it contained many different regions and peoples. Its population spoke different languages such as German, Magyar, Polish, and Italian, and belonged to different ethnic groups like Bohemians, Slovak, Slovenes, Croats, and Romanians. The only common bond among them was loyalty to the emperor. So, if you look at the map of the mid 18th century Europe, you will find that there were no nation state as we know them today. What we know today as Germany, Italy, and Switzerland were divided into kingdom, duchies, and cantons, whose rulers had their own autonomous territories. Eastern and Central Europe were under autocratic monarchies within the territories of which lived diverse peoples. They did not see themselves as sharing a collective identity or a common culture. Often, they even spoke different languages and belonged to different ethnic groups. The Habsburg Empire that ruled over Austria Hungary, for example, was a patchwork of many different regions and peoples. It included Alpine regions, the Tyrol, Austria, and Sudetenland, as well as Bohemia, where the aristocracy was predominantly German speaking. It also included Italian speaking provinces of Lombardy and Venetia. In Hungary, half of the population spoke Magyar, while the other half spoke the variety of dialects. In Galicia, the aristocracy spoke Polish. Besides these three dominant groups, there also lived within the boundaries of the empire a mass of subject peasant peoples, Bohemians and Slovaks to the north, Slovenes in Carniola and Croats to the south, and Romans to the east in Transylvania. Such differences did not easily promote a sense of political unity. The only tie binding these diverse groups together was a common allegiance to the emperor. How did nationalism and the idea of the nation state emerge? Before the rise of nationalism, Germany, Italy, and Switzerland were divided into kingdoms, duchies, and cantons. The Eastern and Central Europe were under autocratic monarchies. The people living within the autocratic empires did not see themselves as sharing a collective identity of common culture, a common currency, a common army, a common religion. The most probable answer will be a collective identity or a common culture. The Habsburg Empire ruled over Austria-Hungary. Which of the following was not part of the Alpine regions of the Habsburg Empire? Tyrol, Sudetenland, and Galicia. They were part of the Habsburg Empire. I think Austria is not the part of Habsburg Empire. Oh, Galicia was not part of Alpine regions. Correct answer is Galicia. Alpine region include Tyrol, Austria, and Sudetenland. Galicia was a separate region where the aristocracy spoke Polish. In Bohemia, the aristocracy mainly speak Italian. No, German. Which provinces of the Habsburg Empire were Italian speaking? Lombardy and Venetia. In Hungary, about half of the population spoke Magyar. Magyar was spoken by about half of the population of Hungary. The others half spoke a variety of dialects. In Galicia, the aristocracy spoke Polish. Galicia is a Polish-speaking aristocracy. Which group lived in the northern part of the Habsburg Empire? Northern part. Bohemians and Slovaks to the north. North of Empire, Bohemians and Slovaks. The people of Carniola were known as Slovenes. The people living in the south of the Habsburg Empire were mainly Croats. The people living in Transylvania were mainly Romanians. Transylvania Romanians. According to the NCRT paragraph, what did not promote a feeling of political unity? Common allegiance to the emperor, different languages and ethnic groups, common administration, trade relations. Different languages and ethnic groups did not promote a feeling of political unity. Different languages, ethnic groups, and cultures did not promote political unity in the Habsburg Empire. What was the only bond that unified the diverse groups of Habsburg Empire? Common allegiance to the emperor. Habsburg Empire means a patchwork empire, contains Alpine regions that include Tyrol, Austria, and Sudetenland, languages and regions. Bohemia, where German speaking aristocracy, Lombardy and Venetia, Italian speaking provinces, Hungary, half spoke Magyar, and Galicia was Polish speaking aristocracy. Peasant communities. In North Bohemians and Slovaks, Carniola in Carniola Slovenes, in South Croats, and in Transylvania Romanians. No political unity because different languages, different ethnic groups, and different cultures. One common bond is that allegiance or loyalty to the emperor. Why was the Habsburg Empire called a patchwork empire? The Habsburg Empire was called a patchwork empire because it consisted of many different regions and peoples speaking different languages and belonging to different ethnic groups. These differences did not promote political unity. The, the only common bond among them was their allegiance to the emperor. Yes, assertion reason. The Habsburg Empire also is called a patchwork empire. Yes, it consisted of many different regions and peoples with different languages and culture. A is true and R is also the correct explanation of assertion. So A will be the most probable answer. The Habsburg Empire was called a patchwork empire because it contained many different regions and peoples with different languages, ethnicities, and cultures. The reason correctly explains the assertion. Germany, Italy, and Switzerland existed as unified nation states in the mid 18th century. They were divided into kingdoms, duchies, and cantons. True. A and R are true, and R is the correct explanation of A. Assertion is false. Germany, Italy, and Switzerland existed as unified nation states. No, they were not existed as unified nation states. They were divided into kingdoms, duchies, and cantons. Assertion is false because Germany, Italy, and Switzerland were not unified nation states in the mid 18th century. Reason is true because they were indeed divided into kingdom, duchies, and cantons. Different languages and ethnic groups promoted political unity in the Habsburg Empire. Different languages and ethnic groups promoted political unity in the Habsburg Empire. No, no political unity. Due to different languages and ethnic groups, they are created ethnic diversities. People in empire shared a common culture and identity. Both A and R are true, false. A is false, but R is true. People in the empire shared a common culture and identity. No. Different languages and ethnic groups promoted political unity in the Habsburg Empire. I think both assertion and reason are false now. Don't know. Different languages and ethnic groups promoted political unity in the Habsburg Empire. False. NCRT says these differences did not promote political unity. Reason are people in the empire shared a common culture and identity. False. They had different languages, cultures, and identities. Correct answer A is false, R is false. Yes. In Cbse assertion and reason questions, this is usually option E if 5 options are given. The only bond among the diverse groups of Habsburg Empire was allegiance to the emperor. That's true. The people shared a common language throughout the empire. No. People shared different languages. A is true, R is false. A is true, R is false. That is C. Not correct. The only bond among the diverse groups of the Habsburg Empire was allegiance to the emperor. That's true. C. Correct answer C. Yes, that's a mistake from ChatGPT. Hungary was linguistically homogeneous. Linguistically means language wise homogeneous, no heterogeneous. There were so many languages. About half the population spoke Magyar, while the other half spoke various dialects. That's true. A is false, R is true. So it will be D. Assertion is wrong, reason is true. Assertion is false, reason is true. Hungary was linguistically homogeneous. Linguistically homogeneous means everyone speaks the same language. No, there were different communities speaking different languages. About half the population of spoke Magyar while the other half spoke various dialects. This is exactly what NCRT states. Therefore, correct answer is D. Assertion is false but reason is true. The Habsburg Empire contained many different ethnic groups. True. It included Bohemia, Slovaks, Slovenes, Croats, Romanians, Germans, Magyars, and Poles. I think A will be the answer. Assertion is true, reason is true, assertion is the correct, reason is the correct explanation for assertion. Assertion: the Habsburg Empire contained many different ethnic groups. It included Bohemians, Slovaks, Slovenes, Croats, Romanians, Germans, Magyars, and Poles. The reason directly explains why the empire contained many different ethnic groups. Which region had a German speaking aristocracy? Bohemia. Yes, Bohemia, German speaking aristocracy. Which province was Italian speaking? Lombardy was Italian speaking. Who lived in Carniola? In Carniola, I think Slovenes or Croats. Slovenes. See. The only common bond in Habsburg Empire was allegiance to the emperor. That means loyalty to the emperor. Galicia's aristocracy mainly spoke Polish. You have now mastered this in the paragraph. Bohemia was German-speaking aristocracy. Lombardy and Venetia were Italian-speaking provinces. In Hungary, the language was Magyar, and in Galicia, it was Polish. In North, Bohemians and Slovaks were there. In Carniola, Slovenes were there, and in South, Croats were there, and in Transylvania, Romanians were there. The Habsburg Empire was a patchwork empire consisting of many ethnic groups speaking different languages. The only common bond among them was allegiance to the emperor. Without looking at the notes, why did the Habsburg Empire fail to develop a feeling of political unity among its people? Because Habsburg Empire was a patchwork empire consisting of many ethnic groups speaking different languages. You have to explain which all groups were there and which all languages does they speak and in which direction which all groups were there. Once again, coming to the NCRT, what we know today as Germany, Italy, and Switzerland were divided into kingdoms, duchies, and cantons. Had their autonomous territories. Eastern and Central Europe were under autocratic monarchies within the territories of which lived diverse peoples. They did not see themselves as sharing a collective identity or a common culture. Often they even spoke different languages and belonged to different ethnic groups. The Habsburg Empire that ruled over Austria Hungary, for example, was a patchwork of many different regions and peoples. It included the Alpine regions, that is the Tyrol, Austria, and Sudetenland, as well as Bohemia, where the aristocracy was predominantly German speaking. It also included Italian speaking provinces of Lombardy and Venetia. In Hungary, half of the population spoke Magyar while the other half spoke a variety of dialects. In Galicia, the aristocracy spoke Polish. Besides these three dominating groups, there also lived within the boundaries of the empire a mass of subject peasant peoples, Bohemians and Slovaks to the north, Slovenes in Carniola, Croats to the south, and Romans to the east in Transylvania. Such differences did not easily promote a sense of political unity. The only tie binding these diverse groups together was a common allegiance to the emperor. Three points. First one will be different ethnic groups. And then people spoke different languages, people had different culture and traditions. These three were the most important points. Spoke different languages, people had different culture. Habsburg Empire failed to develop a feeling of political unity because the people belonged to different ethnic groups, they spoke different languages, they had different cultures and traditions. As a result, they did not see themselves as sharing a collective identity. The only common bond among them was allegiance to the emperor. Whenever you see a question asking why was there no political unity in the Habsburg Empire, remember the formula: different ethnic groups plus different languages plus different cultures is equal to no political unity. And now the next part is the aristocracy and the new middle class. Next paragraph, we are going to discuss the aristocracy and the new middle class. The aristocracy and the new middle class, easy NCRT explanation. This section explains who had power in Europe before nationalism and which social group later supported nationalism. The aristocracy was the dominant class. Aristocracy means rich land owning nobles. Land-owning nobles. They were the most powerful social and political class in Europe. They owned large estates in the countryside. They also owned townhouses. They shared a common lifestyle across Europe. Features of the aristocracy: owned huge lands, had political power, spoke French in high society and diplomacy, families were connected through marriages, lived a luxurious life. They were only a small group in terms of population. Majority were peasants. The most people in Europe were peasants. Western Europe, land was cultivated by tenants and small landowners. In Eastern and Central Europe, land holding pattern was different. Huge estates existed. These estates were worked by serfs. Serfs, the peasants who were legally tied to the land and had very little freedom. Growth of towns and industries. In Western and parts of Central Europe, trade increased, industrial production increased, towns grew, commercial classes emerged. Commercial classes, people who earned through business and production from markets. Example, traders, merchants, and industrialists. Industrialization. England. The industrialization started in the second half of the 18th century. And in France, German states, industrialization started mainly in 19th century. So first the industrialization started in England. New social groups emerged. Because of the industrialization, two new groups appeared. They were working class and middle class. Working class, they were factory workers, laborers. And middle class included industrialists, businessmen, and professionals. That means lawyers, doctors, teachers, etc. Who spread nationalism. In Central and Eastern Europe, these new groups were small until the late 19th century. The ideas of national unity, liberalism, end of aristocratic privileges became popular mainly among educated liberal middle class. The educated liberal middle class became the main supporter of nationalism after the abolition of aristocratic privileges. Aristocracy. What do you mean by aristocracy? Its dominant class owned large estates, spoke French, connected to marriages, and numerically small in number. Peasantry. Majority of population were peasants. In West, they were known as tenants and small owners, and in East and Central, they were serfs on large estates. Industrialization in England began in 18th century. France and German state it began in 19th century, and in new classes, working class and middle class, industrialists, businessmen, and professionals. Nationalism spread mainly by the educated liberal middle class. Aristocracy, peasants, industrialization, middle class, nationalism. Who was the dominant social and political class in Europe? Dominant and political class is landed aristocracy. Landed aristocracy was the dominant social and political class in Europe. What language did aristocrats commonly speak for diplomacy and in high society? French. French was the common language of diplomacy and high society among European aristocrats. The majority of Europe's population was made up of peasantry. The peasantry formed the majority of Europe's population. In Western Europe, most land was farmed by tenants and small owners. In Western Europe, the land was cultivated mainly by tenants and small owners. In Eastern and Central Europe, large estates were generally cultivated by serfs. Industrialization in England began in second half of the 18th century. England was the first country to industrialize beginning in the second half of the 18th century. Industrialization in France and the German state occurred mainly during the 19th century. France and the German state industrialized mainly during the 19th century. Which two new social groups emerged due to industrialization? Working class and middle class. Industrialization gave rise to two groups. They were working class and middle class. Working class included factory workers, laborers, etc. Whereas middle class included industrialists, businessmen, professionals. The ideas of national unity below following the abolition of aristocratic privileges were popular among educated liberal middle class. Why? The educated liberal middle class became the main carrier of the ideas of nationalism, national unity, liberalism, end of aristocratic privileges. This is one of the most important NCERT lines from the chapter. Which of the following is not a part of the middle class mentioned in NCERT? Serfs does not belong to middle class. Serfs were peasants tied to the land, not part of the middle class. Which statement about the aristocracy is correct? They formed the majority of population. They spoke different local languages and had no common lifestyle. They were united by a common way of life that cut across regional divisions. They mainly worked on factories. Aristocrats. The majority of the population. No, peasants was majority of the population. They spoke different local languages. Then no, they spoke French. They were united by a common way of life that cut across regional divisions. They mainly worked in factories. They didn't work in factories. C will be the most probable answer. Explanation. The aristocracy owned large estates in the countryside, had town houses, spoke French, were connected through marriages, shared a common lifestyle across Europe despite regional differences. What was the main occupation of the commercial class that emerged in Western and Central Europe? In Western and Central Europe, there were farming large estates, trade and industrial production. The NCERT states that in western parts of Central Europe, trade expanded, industrial production grew, commercial classes emerged. These commercial classes were mainly involved in trade and industrial production, not farming. Commercial class, who were called serfs. Peasants bound to work on large estates were serfs. Explanation. Serfs were peasants who worked on large estates in Eastern and Central Europe. They had very little freedom and were often bound to the land. Which country was the first to industrialize? It was England. England was the first country to industrialize beginning the second half of the 18th century. According to NCRT, the new middle class consisted of industrialists, businessmen, and professionals. Aristocracy. Dominant class in Europe owned large estates and townhouses, spoke French, connected through marriages, shared a common lifestyle. Small in number. Peasantry. Majority of population. Western Europe. Tenants and small landowners. Eastern and Central Europe. Large estates cultivated by serfs. Industrialization. England, second half of the 18th century. France and German state, 19th century. And new classes. Working class were known as factory workers and laborers. Middle class were industrialists, businessmen, and professionals. Nationalism. Main supporters were educated liberal middle class, supported national unity, liberalism, and end of aristocratic privileges. Describe the aristocracy and the new middle class in Europe. The aristocracy was the dominant social and political class in Europe. They owned large estates in the countryside and townhouses and spoke French. They were united by a common lifestyle and family that ties through marriages. Industrialization led to the growth of a new middle class consisting of industrialists, businessmen, and professionals. The educated liberal middle class became the main supporter of nationalism and national unity. The dominant social class in Europe was the aristocrats. Aristocrats commonly spoke French. Large estates in Eastern Europe were cultivated by serfs and peasants. Hope so. England. Large estates in Eastern Europe were cultivated by, I hope it is tenants. England industrialized in the second half of the 19th century. 18th century. The main supporters of nationalism were the educated liberal. The main supporters of nationalism were the educated liberal, middle class. Hope so. Aristocrats, French is correct, tenants 18 middle class. The large estates in Eastern Europe were cultivated by serfs. In the west, tenants was in the west, whereas in the Eastern and Central Europe, the land holding was characterized by or cultivated by serfs. Western Europe, tenants and small landowners. In Eastern and Central Europe, serfs on large estates. Why did the educated liberal middle class become the main supporters of nationalism? Answer in points. Why did the educated liberal middle class became the main supporters of nationalism? They believed in national unity and wanted people of the same nation to be united. They supported liberal ideas such as freedom, equality, and representative government. They opposed special privileges of the aristocracy. Industrialization helped the growth of the class, making them socially and economically influential. After the abolition of aristocratic privileges, They became the main force behind nationalistic movements. The educated liberal middle class supported nationalism because they believed in national unity and liberalism. They opposed aristocratic privileges and wanted freedom and equality for citizens. Aristocracy and the middle class. The aristocracy and the new middle class. Socially and politically, landed aristocracy was the dominant class of the continent. Let's take a short break of 10 minutes. Take the time to stretch, relax, and grab some water. Welcome back, everyone. Let's continue. The aristocracy and the new middle class. Socially and politically, landed aristocracy was the dominant class on the continent. The members of this class were united by a common way of life that cut across regional divisions. They owned estates in the countryside and also townhouses. They spoke French for purpose of diplomacy and in high society. Their families were connected by ties of marriage. This powerful aristocracy was, however, numerically a small group. The majority of the population was made up of peasantry. To the west of the bulk of the land was farmed by tenants and small owners, while in Eastern and Central Europe the pattern of land holding was characterized by vast estates which were cultivated by serfs. Serfs were on Eastern and Central Europe, whereas tenants were on West. In Western and parts of Central Europe, the growth of industrial production and trade meant the growth of towns and the emergence of commercial classes whose existence was based on production for the market. Industrialization began in England in the second half of the 18th century, but in France and parts of German states it occurred only during the 19th century. In its wake, new social groups came into being, a working class population and a middle class made up of industrialists, businessmen, professionals. In Central and Eastern Europe, these groups were smaller in number till late 19th century. It was among the educated liberal class that ideas of national unity following the abolition of aristocratic privileges gained popularity. Which of the following best describes the aristocracy in Europe? They were rich landowners who formed the dominant social and political class. They were factory owners and industrialists? No. They were mainly peasants working on large estates? No. They were traders engaged in commerce? No. The most probable answer is B. The aristocracy were rich landowners and the dominant social and political class in Europe. Which statement about the aristocracy is incorrect? They owned estates in the countryside. They spoke French for diplomacy. They formed the majority of Europe's population. They were connected through marriages. They formed the majority of Europe's population. It is wrong. They were less in number. Aristocracy were numerically a small group, not the majority of Europe's population. In Eastern and Central Europe, large estates were mainly worked by. In Eastern and Central Europe, the large estates were mainly worked by serfs, and tenants were in the West. Serfs worked on the large estates in Eastern and Central Europe. The growth of towns and trade in Western Europe led to the emergence of. The growth of towns and trade in Western Europe led to the emergence of commercial classes. Hope so. Yes. The trade, expansion of trade, industrial production, and towns led to the emergence of commercial classes such as traders, merchants, and businessmen, who became the main supporters of nationalism in Europe. Who became the main supporters of nationalism in Europe? Educated liberal middle class. Why? The educated liberal middle class became the main supporters of nationalism because they believed in national unity, supported liberal ideas, freedom, equality, and representative government, opposed aristocratic privileges. Which of the following was not a part of the educated liberal middle class? Industrialists, businessmen, professionals were all part of educated liberal middle class. Serfs was not in that category. Serfs were peasants tied to the land and were not part of the educated liberal middle class. Which sequence is correct according to NCRT? Aristocracy, industrialization, new middle class, and nationalism. B will be the most probable answer. Yes. Aristocracy dominated the society, industrialization led to economic and social changes, a new middle class emerged, the educated liberal middle class became the main supporters of nationalism. Why did the commercial classes emerge in Western and Central Europe? Due to decline of trade and towns, due to growth of trade, industrial production and towns, due to abolition of monarchy, due to spread of serfdom. Due to growth of trade, industrial production and towns, commercial classes emerge in Western and Central Europe. The commercial classes emerged because of growth of trade, increase in industrial production, expansion of towns. These developments created opportunities for merchants, traders, and businessmen. Which statement best explains why the aristocracy remained powerful? They controlled factories and industries. They owned large estates and held social and political power. They formed the majority of population. They were the main supporters of nationalism. They owned large estates and held social and political power. The aristocracy remained powerful because they owned large landed estates, they possessed significant social prestige, they held considerable political influence, their wealth and status gave them dominance over society. Which of the following statements is correct? The majority of Europeans belong to aristocracy. No, not correct. Industrialization first began in France. No, England. The educated liberal middle class became the main force behind nationalism. Educated liberal middle class became the main force behind nationalism. Yes, that's true. Serfs were part of the commercial class. Serfs were not part of the commercial class. So C will be the answer. The educated liberal middle class became the main force behind nationalism. The other options are incorrect because majority were peasants, not aristocrats. Industrialization first began in England and not France. Serfs were peasants, not part of the commercial classes. Who among the following would most likely support the ideas of nationalism and liberalism? Who among the following would most likely support the ideas of nationalism and liberalism? A serf working on a large estate, an aristocrat enjoying special privileges, an educated lawyer from the middle class, a feudal landlord. An educated lawyer from the middle class. An educated lawyer from the middle class would most likely support nationalism. For national unity, liberalism, freedom, equality, and representative government, this class became the main force behind nationalist movement in Europe. The abolition of aristocratic privileges mainly benefited the abolition of aristocratic privileges mainly benefited educated liberal middle class. Why? The educated liberal middle class benefited the most from the abolition of aristocratic privileges because it opened opportunities in politics and administration. They supported equality before law. They opposed to the special rights enjoyed by aristocrats. They became the leading supporters of nationalism and liberalism. Which one of the following correctly matches the group with its characteristics? Aristocracy was done by factory workers, serfs bound to large estates, middle class, feudal landlords, commercial classes, peasant farmers. Correctly matches. Aristocracy were not factory workers, middle class were not feudal landlords, commercial classes were not peasant farmers. Serf bound to large estates will be the most probable answer. Yes. Aristocracy are rich landowners, not factory workers. Middle class are industrialists, businessmen, and professionals. Commercial classes are traders and merchants, not peasant farmers. Which factor contributed most to the rise of the new middle class? Which factor contributed most to the rise of the new middle class? Growth of serfdom? No. Industrialization and expansion of trade? Yes. Decline of towns? No. Increase in aristocratic privileges? No. Abolition of aristocratic privileges. So, industrialization and expansion of trade contributed most to the rise of the new middle class. The rise of new middle class was mainly due to industrialization, expansion of trade, growth of towns, increase in commercial activities. These changes created opportunities for industrialists, businessmen, and professionals. Which of the following statement is not correct according to NCRT? Aristocrats owned estates in the countryside and houses in towns. That's true. French was more commonly spoken among aristocrats. That's also true. The educated liberal middle class opposed to nationalism. The educated liberal middle class opposed to nationalism. No, they supported nationalism. England industrialized before France and the German states. That's true. So C will be the most probable answer. The correct. The educated liberal middle class opposed to nationalism. This statement is not true because the educated liberal middle class were actually the strongest supporters of nationalism. The other statements are true. A. Aristocrats owned estates in the countryside and houses in towns. B. French was commonly spoken among aristocrats. D. England industrialized before France and the German states. 32nd revision. Aristocracy. Dominant class owned large estates, spoken French, shared common lifestyle. And peasantry. Majority population, invest tenants and small owners, and in East serfs. Industrialization. England was industrialized in 18th century. France and German state were industrialized in 19th century. New classes, working class and middle classes evolved. Nationalism. Main supporters were educated liberal middle class. Rapid fire. Which language was spoken by aristocrats? French. Who cultivated large estates in Eastern Europe? Eastern Europe, it was serfs. Which country industrialized first? England. Name any two groups included in the middle class. That include businessmen, industrialists, etc. Who became the main supporters of nationalism? Educated, liberal, middle class. So coming to the next section, that is, why did liberal nationalism stand for? What did liberal nationalism stands for? Liberal nationalism. Liberal nationalism. What did liberal nationalism stands for? Easy NCERT explanation. This section explains the meaning of liberalism and how it was connected to nationalism in Europe. Liberalism and nationalism were closely linked. In early 19th century Europe, the idea of national unity was closely connected with liberalism. Meaning of liberalism. The word liberalism comes from the Latin word liber, meaning free. What did liberalism mean for the middle class? For the new middle class, liberalism stood for political rights. That means freedom of individual, equality before law, government by consent of the people, end of autocracy or absolute rule, end of clerical privileges, that is special powers of the church, constitution, representative government through parliament, and economic rights, protection of private property. Did liberalism means voting rights for everyone? No. Equality before law did not mean universal suffrage. Universal suffrage means right of all adult citizens to vote. 19th century liberals did not support universal suffrage. Voting rights in revolutionary France. In revolutionary France, only property owning men could vote and get elected. Men without property could not vote and women could not vote. Thus, political rights were limited. What happened under the Jacobins? For a short period, all male adults got voting rights. This was the first example of broader suffrage. What did the Napoleonic Code do? The Napoleonic Code brought back limited suffrage, reduced women to the status of minors. So women became legally dependent on fathers and husbands. Struggle for equal rights. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, women and non-propertied men started opposition movements demanding equal political rights and voting rights. Economic liberalism. Liberalism also had an economic meaning. It supported freedom of markets, free movement of goods, free movement of capital, opposed to government restrictions on trade. The growing middle class strongly supported these ideas. 1 minute revision. Liberalism means freedom. Word comes from liber means free. Political liberalism means freedom of individual, equality before law, government by consent, end of autocracy, end of clerical privileges, constitution, parliament. Economic liberalism means freedom of markets, free movement of goods and capitals, and protection of private property. Suffrage, universal suffrage is equal to voting rights for all adults. Liberals did not initially support it. Only property owning men could vote. Women and poor men were excluded. Jacobins gave voting rights to all adult males for a short period. Napoleonic Code limited suffrage again. Women treated as minors. Important NCRT line. Equality before the law did not necessarily stand for universal suffrage. This is one of the most frequently asked line in Cbse board exam. Equality before the law did not necessarily stand for universal suffrage. Universal suffrage means everybody have the right to vote, but equality before law was not necessarily for universal suffrage. Means equality before the law was failed in the case of universal suffrage because only property having men were given the right to vote and to be elected as a member. No woman and non-propertied men were not allowed to vote. Freedom of individual, equality before law, government by consent, constitution, parliament. Markets free, goods free, capital free. What did liberal nationalism stands for? Ideas of national unity in early 19th century Europe were closely allied to the idea of liberalism. The term liberalism derives from the root liber, meaning free. For the new middle class, liberalism stood for freedom for the individual, equality of all before law, and politically, it emphasized the concept of government by consent. Since the French Revolution, liberalism had stood for end of autocracy and clerical privileges, a constitution, and a representative government through parliament. 19th century liberals also stressed the inviolability of private property. Yet equality before the law did not necessarily stand for universal suffrage. This is an important sentence that has to be studied. Because equality before law has failed in case of universal suffrage. Suffrage means right to vote. Universal suffrage means everybody have the right to vote. But here the case was different. You will recall that in revolutionary France, which marked the first political experiment in liberal democracy, the right to vote to get elected was granted exclusively to property owning men. Men without property and all women were excluded from political rights. Only for a brief period under the Jacobins did all adult males enjoy suffrage. However, the Napoleonic Code went back to limited suffrage and reduced women to the status of a minor. Subject to the authority of fathers and husbands. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, women and non-propertied men organized opposition movements demanding equal political rights. In the economic sphere, liberalism stood for freedom of the markets and abolition of state-imposed restrictions on the movements of goods and capitals. During the 19th century, this was a strong demand of the emerging middle class. Let us take the example of German-speaking regions in the first half of the 19th century. Napoleon's administrative measures had created out of countless principalities a confederation of 39 states. Next one is economic liberalization, economic liberalism and sovereign. Easy NCRT explanation. This paragraph explains why businessmen wanted economic unity in Germany and how it helped nationalism grow. First, Germany was divided into 39 states. After Napoleon's administrative changes, the German speaking region became a confederation of 39 states. Each state had its own currency, its own weights and measures, its own custom duties. Problems faced by merchants. A merchant traveling from Hamburg to Nuremberg in 1833 had to cross 11 custom barriers, pay about 5% of custom duty at each barrier. This made trade expensive, slow, and difficult. Problem of different weights and measures. Each state had its own measurement system. Example, the unit of cloth called LA had different length in different cities. For example, in Frankfurt it contained 54.7 centimeter, and in Mainz 55.1 centimeter, and in Nuremberg it cost 65.6 centimeter, and in Freiburg it cost 53.5 centimeter. This caused confusion, time consuming calculations, and trade difficulties. Demand of the commercial class. The new commercial classes, that is businessmen, merchants, traders, believed these barriers were harmful. They demanded a unified economic territory where there would be free movement of goods, free movement of people, and free movement of capital. Formation of Zollverein. What was Zollverein? Zollverein is German customs union, formed in 1834, initiated by Prussia, joined by most German states. Achievements of Zollverein: abolished tariff barriers, that is internal custom duties were removed. Reduced currencies, number of currencies were reduced from more than 30 to just 2. Improved trade, easier movement of trades. Railway network expanded, that is increased mobility and connected different regions. How did Zollverein help nationalism? The customs union linked economic interest with national unity, created a feeling of belonging among German states, encouraged economic nationalism, strengthened nationalist sentiments. Thus, economic unity became a step towards political unity. Problems before Zollverein. 39 German states were there, different currencies were there, different weights and measures were there, 11 custom barriers were there, 5% duty at each barrier. Commercial classes wanted unified economic territory, free movements of goods, free movements of people, free movements of capital, and Zollverein in 1834, started by Prussia, was the German customs union. Effects: removed tariff barriers, reduced currencies from 30 to 2, boosted trade, expanded railways, and strengthened nationalism. Most important board questions. What was Zollverein? Zollverein was a customs union formed in 1834 under the leadership of Prussia. It abolished tariff barriers among German states, reduced the number of currencies, promoted free trade, and helped strengthen German nationalism. How did Zollverein promote nationalism in Germany? It abolished tariff barriers among German states. It encouraged free movements of goods, people, and capital. It linked economic interest to national unification. It strengthened national sentiments among German people. 39, 11, 5%, 1834 Zollverein nationalism. From 39 states, 11 custom barriers, 5% duty, Zollverein in 1834, economic unity, nationalism. Countless small principalities, confederation of 39 states. Each of these possessed its own currency and weights and measures. A merchant traveling in 1833 from Hamburg to Nuremberg to sell his goods would have had to pass 11 custom barriers and pay a custom duty of about 5% at each one of them. Duties were often levied according to weight or measurement of the goods. As each region had its own system of weights and measures, this involved time consuming calculation. The measure of cloth, for example, was the LA, which in each region stood for a different length. An LE of textile material bought in Frankfurt will get you in 54.4 54.7 centimeter of cloth. In Mainz it is 55.1 centimeter, Nuremberg it is 65.6 centimeter, and in Freiburg it is 53.5 centimeter. Such conditions were viewed as obstacles to economic exchange and growth by the new commercial class, who argued for the creation of a unified economic territory allowing the unhindered movement of goods, people, and capital. In 1834, a custom union or Zollverein was formed at the initiative of Prussia and joined by the most of the German states. The union abolished tariff barriers and reduced the number of currencies from over 30 to 2. The creation of a network of railways further stimulated mobility, harnessing economic interest to national unification. A wave of economic nationalization strengthened the wider nationalist sentiments growing at the time. Need MCQs. After Napoleon's administrative measures, the German-speaking regions were organized into 39 states. In 1833, a merchant traveling from Hamburg to Nuremberg had to pass through 11 custom barriers. Approximately how much customs duty had to be paid at each customer's barrier? 5%. What was the name of the cloth measurement unit mentioned in the NCRT? LA. LA. Why did the commercial class demand a unified economic territory? To increase the number of custom barriers, to promote the movement of goods, people, and capital, to create more currencies, to strengthen the power of local rulers. B. The commercial classes wanted a unified economic territory so that there could be free movement of goods, free movement of people, free movement of capital. This would make trade easier and more profitable. The Zollverein was a customs union. It was formed in 1834 under the leadership of Prussia. Its main aim was to remove tariff barriers, promote free trade, create economic unity among German states. Who took the initiative to form the Zollverein in 1834? Initiative was made by Prussia. Why? Prussia took the initiative in forming the Zollverein in 1834. Prussia was the most powerful German state and played a leading role in promoting economic unity. One major achievement of the Zollverein was abolishing tariff barriers among German states. Increasing the number of currencies. No, Zollverein reduced the number of currencies. Dividing Germany into more states. No. Strengthening custom duties. Reducing custom duties. Abolishing tariff barriers among German states is the correct statement. One of the most important achievements of the Zollverein was the abolition of tariff barriers among German states. This made trade faster, cheaper, easier, and helped create economic unity. The number of currencies in the Zollverein area was reduced from more than 30 to 2. Why? Zollverein reduced the number of currencies from more than 30 to just 2. This simplified trade, reduced confusion, promoted economic integration among German states. How did the Zollverein help German nationalism? How did Solverin help German nationalism? By increasing political divisions? No. By linking economic interests to the national unification? That can be the answer. By creating more customs barriers? No. Reducing the custom barriers. By strengthening local rulers? No. By linking economic interest to national unification will be the correct. The Solverin helped German nationalism by creating economic unity among German states, encouraging free movement of goods, people, and capital, making people realize their common economic interest, linking economic integration with the idea of national unification. Which of the following was a major obstacle to trade in the German Confederation before 1834? Before 1834, different currencies and custom barriers were there. B. Before 1834, trade in the German Confederation was difficult because there were many custom barriers. Different states used different currencies, different weights and measures created confusion. These obstacles increased the cost and time of trade. Which statement about Sullivan is incorrect? It was formed in 1834. That's true. It was initiated by Prussia. Yes, true. It increases tariff barriers between German states. It reduced tariff barriers. So it is incorrect. It promoted economic integration. That will be true. C. This is incorrect because the Sullivan did the exact opposite. It abolished tariff barriers, reduced the number of currencies, promoted free trade, encouraged economic integration. The Sullivan is also known as the German Customs Union. P. Sullivan is known as the German Customs Union, formed in 1834, initiated by Prussia, included most German states, removed internal customs barriers, promoted free trade and economic unity. The expansion of the railway network after the Sullivan increased mobility and economic growth. The expansion of the railway network increased the mobility of people, helped transport goods faster and cheaper, connected different German states, promoted economic growth and national integration. Which sequence is correct? Sovereign 39 states, custom barrier, nationalism. Custom barriers, sovereign lead to economic unity that lead to nationalism. A is wrong because when sovereign does not lead to 39 states. Customs barriers lead to sovereign. Customs barriers. Nationalism, sovereign, economic unity. No. Economic unity, custom barriers, sovereign. No. I think B will be the most suitable answer. Yes, customs barriers lead to sovereign in 1834 that leads to economic unity and nationalism. Germany had many customs barriers and trade restrictions. Sovereign abolished these barriers. This created economic unity among German states. Economic unity strengthened nationalist feeling and encouraged political unification. Before sovereign, 39 German states were there, different currencies were there, different weights and measures were there, 11 customs barriers were there, 5% duty at each barrier was there. Sovereign in 1834, initiated by Prussia, German Customs Union abolished tariff barriers, reduced currencies from 30 to 2. Results: free movement of goods, expansion of railways, economic unity, and growth of nationalism. Memory formula: 39 states, 11 custom barriers, 5% tax. 1834, it was sovereign was introduced by Prussia, sovereign, economic unity, and it leads to nationalism. But the term liberalism is derived from the Latin word liber. Liber means free. For 19th century liberals, freedom meant freedom of individual and equality before law. Why? For 19th century liberals, freedom meant freedom of individual, equality before law, government by consent, constitution, and a representative government. Which of the following was not necessarily implied by equality before the law according to 19th century liberals? Protection of private property, universal suffrage, freedom of the individual, representative government. Equality was not provided for universal suffrage. The equality before the law did not necessarily stand for universal suffrage. 19th century liberals did not believe that every adult should have the right to vote. In revolutionary France, voting rights were given to property owning men. In revolutionary France, only property owning men had the right to vote and get elected. Women could not vote, men without property could not vote. For a brief period, who granted voting rights to all adult males? Jacobins. The Jacobins introduced universal male suffrage for a short period. This means all adult men could vote regardless of property ownership. However, this did not last long. The Napoleonic Code introduced universal suffrage permanently, restored limited suffrage and reduced women to the status of minors, gave women equal political rights, abolished private property. B. The Napoleonic Code restored limited suffrage, reduced women to the status of minors, made women legally dependent on their fathers and husbands, and ended universal male suffrage. According to liberals, which of the following was essential for a nation? Constitution and representative government. Nineteenth century liberals wanted a constitution, a representative government or parliament, government by consent of the people. They opposed absolute monarchy, aristocratic privileges, and clerical privileges. Which of the following was not opposed by liberals? Which of the following was not opposed by liberals? Which of the following was not opposed by liberals? Autocracy, clerical privileges, protection of private property, absolute monarchy. Autocracy, they opposed to clerical privileges, opposed to absolute monarchy, opposed, but protection of private property they demanded. Liberals supported protection of private property. They opposed to autocracy, absolute monarchy, and clerical privileges. But they supported freedom of individual, equality before law, constitution, representative government, and protection of private property. Economic liberalization stood for freedom of markets and unrestricted movement of goods and capitals. Economic liberalization means freedom of markets, free movement of goods, free movement of capital, no necessary trade restrictions. The growing middle class strongly supported these ideas, who began movements demanding equal political rights during the 19th and early 20th centuries. Women and non-propertied men. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, the following groups started movements demanding equal political rights: women and non-propertied men, that is, men without property. They demanded voting rights, equal political participation, equal citizenship rights. Which of the following was excluded from the voting rights in revolutionary France? Which of the following was excluded from voting rights in revolutionary France? Property owning men, men elected to office, women, both women and men without property. They were excluded from the voting rights. So D will be the answer. In revolutionary France, property owning men could vote. Men could not, women could not vote. Men without property could not vote. Therefore, both women and non-property men were excluded from voting rights. Which statement best reflects the liberal idea of government? Government should be based on hereditary monarchy. No. Government should be based on the consent of the people. Government should be controlled by the church. No. Government should be controlled by aristocrats. No. B will be the answer. According to liberal thinkers, government should be based on consent of the people, constitution, representative institutions or parliament. They opposed hereditary monarchy ruled by aristocrats controlled by the church. Which one of the following was not part of political liberalism? Equality before law, freedom of the individual, protection of private property, government by consent. Which one of the following was not part of political liberalism? Government by consent is true, equality before law is true, freedom of the individual is true, protection of private property, that is not part of political liberalization. C will be the most probable answer. Incorrect. This is the NCERT trap question. Correct answer is protection of private property. That is correct. That is ChatGPT often make mistakes. This is one of the mistake. We give correct answer as C. NCERT divides liberalism into political liberalism and economic liberalism. Political liberalism, freedom of the individual, equality before law, government by consent, constitution, representative government. And economic liberalism, protection of private property, freedom of markets, free movement of goods and capital. That all belong to economic liberalism. So protection of private property belongs to economic liberalism and not political liberalism. Which of the following pairs is correctly matched? Liber, equality, no. Liber means free, that is correctly matched. Liberalism, universal suffrage, no. Jacobins, limited suffrage. Liber means free is the correct match. Why? The word liberalism comes from the Latin word liber, which means free. This is one of the most important one-word facts for NCERT. Which statement correct according to the 19th century liberals? All adults should have the right to vote. That's wrong. Equality before law automatically means universal suffrage. No. Only property owning men had political rights in revolutionary France. That is true. Women enjoyed equal political rights under the Napoleonic Code. No. They were not given political rights during Napoleonic Code. In revolutionary France, only property owning men had political rights and could vote. Women could not vote. Men without property could not vote. Therefore, only property owning men had their political rights in revolutionary France. Which of the following did liberals oppose? Autocracy, clerical privileges, constitution, representative government. They opposed 1 and 2. A. Liberals opposed autocracy, clerical privileges. Equality before the law did not necessarily stand for universal suffrage. This means equality before law and voting rights were not considered the same thing by liberals. This is break time. Let's take a short break. Stretch, drink some water, and chill. Welcome back, friends. What was the question? The equality before the law did not necessarily stand for universal suffrage. That means equality before law and voting rights were not considered the same thing by liberals. The NCRT line means that equality before the law is equal to everyone is treated equally by the legal system. Universal suffrage, that is, every adult citizen has the right to vote. 19th century liberals believed in equality before law, but they did not support voting rights for all adults. Equality before law and voting rights were not considered the same thing by liberals, who were allowed to vote and get elected in revolutionary France. Property owning men. Both B and D are correct. Oh, D is property owning woman. B is the only correct option. In revolutionary France, property owning men could vote and get elected. Women could not vote. Men without property could not vote, who were reduced to the status of minors under the Napoleonic Code. Women. Why? Under the Napoleonic Code, women were reduced to the status of minors. They were legally dependent on their fathers or husbands. They did not enjoy equal political or legal rights. Which of the following correctly matches the concept with its meaning? Liberalism means ruled by monarchs. Which of the following correctly matches the concept with its meaning? Liberalism means ruled by monarchs. Universal suffrage means voting rights for all adult citizens. And clerical privileges means equality before law, and economic liberalism means government control over markets. Liberalism means which one of the following correctly matches the concept with its meaning? Liberalism ruled by monarchs. No. Universal suffrage, voting rights for all adult citizens. Clerical privileges, equality before law. Economic liberalism, government control over markets. Then universal suffrage, voting rights for all adult citizens. Matches with its meaning. Why? Universal suffrage means the right of all adult citizens to vote regardless of wealth or property. The other options are incorrect. Liberalism means freedom not ruled by monarchs. Clerical privileges means special privileges of the church. And economic liberalism means freedom of markets, not government control. One word answers. Liber means free, universal suffrage means voting rights for all adults, and Jacobins means introduced universal male suffrage briefly. Napoleonic Code restored limited suffrage. 1834 Sovereign formed Prussia, initiated Sovereign. Rapid fire. Liber means free. Liberals wanted the end of autocracy. Economic liberalism supported freedom of markets. Who demanded equal political rights in the 19th century? Women and non-property men. Sovereign was formed in 1834. Now you have to move to the next section, that is conservatism. A new conservatism after 1815. A new conservatism after 1815. Let's go through the chapter. This section explains what happened in Europe after Napoleon was defeated in 1815. Rise of conservatism. After Napoleon's death in 1815, European rulers adopted conservatism. What is conservatism? Conservatives believed that the traditional institutions should be preserved. This included monarchy, church, social hierarchies, property, family, etc. should be preserved. Did conservatives want to go back completely to the old system? No. Most conservatives did not want a complete return to the pre-revolutionary society. They accepted some changes brought by Napoleon because they believed modernization could strengthen monarchies. They supported modern army, efficient bureaucracy, dynamic economy, abolition of feudalism, abolition of serfdom. This would make monarchies stronger and more effective. Congress of Vienna 1815. After defeating Napoleon, representatives of four major powers met in Vienna. They were countries Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Their purpose was to create a new settlement for Europe after Napoleon's defeat. It was hosted by Duke Metternich. He was an Austrian chancellor. Treaty of Vienna in 1815. The Congress prepared the Treaty of Vienna in 1815. Main objective: undo most of the changes introduced by Napoleon. Major decisions of the treaty: Bourbon dynasty restored to power in France. France lost territories annexed by the Napoleon. Buffer states introduced around France. To prevent future French expansion, in the north, Kingdom of Netherlands was created including Belgium, and in the south, Genoa added to the Piedmont. This acted as buffer states. Buffer states, a country created to protect another country from attack. Prussia received important territories on its western frontier. Austria, given control over northern Italy, and Russia received part of Poland, and Prussia also received part of Saxony. What remained unchanged? The German confederation of 39 states created by Napoleon was left untouched. Main aim of the Vienna settlement: restore monarchies removed by Napoleon, create a conservative order in Europe, prevent future French expansion, maintain peace and stability. 1 minute revision. Conservatism: preserve monarchy, preserve church, preserve social hierarchy, preserve property and family. Congress of Vienna was conducted in 1815, hosted by Metternich, and the countries involved in Treaty of Vienna was Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Treaty of Vienna: Bourbon dynasty was restored, France lost territories, Netherlands plus Belgium created, Genoa added to Piedmont, Austria got northern Italy, Russia got part of Poland, Prussia got western territories and part of Saxony. German confederation, that is 39 states, unchanged. Main aim was to restore monarchies and establish a conservative order in Europe. What do we mean by conservatism? Conservatism means a political philosophy that stressed the importance of tradition, established institutions and customs, and preferred gradual development to quick change. A new conservatism after 1815, followed by the defeat of Napoleon 1815, European governments were driven a spirit of conservatism. Conservatives believed that established traditional institutions of state and society like the monarchy, church, social hierarchies, property, and the family should be preserved. Most conservatives, however, did not propose a return to the society or pre-revolutionary days. Rather, they realized from the changes initiated by Napoleon that modernization could in fact strengthen traditional institutions like monarchy. It would make state power more effective and strong. A modern army, an efficient bureaucracy, and a dynamic economy, the abolition of feudalism and serfdom could strengthen the autocratic monarchies of Europe. In 1815, representatives of European power, they were Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria, who had collectively defeated Napoleon, met at Vienna to draw up a settlement for Europe. The Congress was hosted by Austrian Chancellor Duke Metternich, drew up the Treaty of Vienna with the object of undoing most changes that had come about in Europe during the Napoleonic Wars. The Bourbon dynasty, which had been deposed during the French Revolution, was restored to power. France lost the territories it had annexed under Napoleon. A series of states were set up on the boundaries of France to prevent French expansion in future. Thus, the kind of thus the Kingdom of Netherlands, which included Belgium, was set up in north. Genova was added to the Piedmont in the south. Prussia was given important new territories on its western frontiers, while Austria was given control of northern Italy. But the German Confederation of 39 states that had been set up by Napoleon was left untouched. In the east, Russia was given part of Poland, while Prussia was given portion of Saxony. The main intention was to restore the monarchies that had been overthrown by Napoleon and create a new conservative order in Europe. And coming to the last paragraph, continuation of conservatism. After 1815, many governments established in Europe were autocratic. These governments did not tolerate criticism, did not allow dissent, that is, disagreement with the government, tried to stop activities that questioned their authorities. Use of censorship. To control people's thought and opinions, conservative governments introduced censorship laws. What is censorship? Censorship means government control over what people can read, write, publish, or say. They control newspapers, books, plays, songs, etc. Especially those that spread ideas of liberty, freedom, nationalism, which were associated with the French Revolution. The Club of Thinkers caricature. The cartoon shown is called The Club of Thinkers. It is a satire, mocking cartoon on censorship. What does it show? The members wear muzzles, that is, mouth covers. The rules include silence is the first command. Muzzles will be given to members to prevent them from speaking. Message of the cartoon. The cartoon criticizes conservative governments because people were not allowed to express their opinions freely. Freedom of speech was suppressed. French Revolution still inspired liberals. Even though conservatives tried to suppress revolutionary ideas, the memory of the French Revolution continued to inspire liberals. Liberals still believed in freedom, equality, nationalism, and representative government. Demand for freedom of the press. One of the major demands of liberal nationalists was freedom of the press. Meaning, freedom of the press means newspapers and writers can publish opinions without government censorship. Liberals believed that people should be free to express ideas. Government should not silence criticism. 1 minute revision. Conservative regimes after 1815. Autocratic governments, no criticism allowed, no dissent allowed. Censorship laws controlled newspapers, books, play, and songs. Club of thinkers, cartoon mocking censorship. Members wear muscles, symbol of suppression of free speech. Liberals wanted freedom, equality, nationalism, and freedom of the press. Important definitions. Autocratic government, a government where one ruler has absolute power. Dissent, disagreement with government policies. Censorship, government control over published ideas and information. Freedom of the press, the right of newspapers and media to publish without government interference. Most important Cbse question. Why did liberal nationalists demand freedom of the press? Conservative governments imposed censorship laws and restricted criticism. Newspapers, books, plays, and songs promoting liberty and nationalism were controlled. Therefore, liberal nationalists demanded freedom of the press to express their views freely and spread ideas of nationalism and liberty. After the defeat of Napoleon in 1815, European governments were driven by a spirit of conservatism. After Napoleon's defeat in 1815, European governments followed conservatism, which aimed to preserve monarchy, church, social hierarchies, property, family. Conservatives believed that which of the following should be preserved: traditional institutions of state and society, revolutionary governments, universal suffrage, republican rule. Traditional institutions of state and society should be preserved. Why? Conservatives believed that established traditional institutions of society should be preserved, such as monarchy, church, social hierarchies, property, family, etc. Did most conservatives wanted a complete return to the pre-revolutionary society? Did most conservatives want a complete return to the pre-revolutionary society? Did most conservatives wanted a complete return to the pre-revolutionary society? No. They accepted some modern changes. Why? Most conservatives did not want a complete return to the old order. They accepted some changes introduced by Napoleon because they believed modernization could strengthen monarchies. They supported modern army, efficient bureaucracy, dynamic economy, abolition of feudalism, abolition of serfdom. Which of the following reforms did conservatives support? Universal suffrage, no. Freedom of press, no. Feudalism and serfdom, no. Efficient bureaucracy and modern army. They supported efficient bureaucracy and modern army. Conservatives supported reforms that could strengthen monarchy, such as efficient bureaucracy, modern army, dynamic economy. They did not support universal suffrage or freedom of the press. The Congress of Vienna was held in 1815. The Congress of Vienna was held in 1815 after the defeat of Napoleon. Its main aim was to restore machine monarchies, establish a conservative order, prevent future French expansion, maintain peace and stability in Europe. Who hosted the Congress of Vienna? The Congress of Vienna was hosted by Duke Metternich. See, Duke Metternich, Austrian Chancellor, hosted the Congress of Vienna in 1815 and played the leading role in shaping the Vienna settlement. Which four major powers participated in the Congress of Vienna? Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. A. The major powers that participated in the Congress of Vienna were Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. What was the main objective of the Treaty of Vienna of 1815? To spread nationalism in Europe, to restore monarchies and undo Napoleon's changes, to establish republics in Europe, to introduce universal suffrage. What was the main objective of the Treaty of Vienna of 1815? To restore monarchies and undo Napoleon's changes. B. Correct. The Treaty of Vienna 1815 aimed to restore monarchies that Napoleon had removed, undo most of the changes introduced by Napoleon, re-establish the conservative order in Europe, and prevent future French expansion. Which dynasty was restored to power in France after 1815? Bourbon dynasty. Why? After Napoleon's defeat, the Bourbon dynasty was restored to power in France by the Treaty of Vienna 1815. This was part of the conservative goal of restoring traditional monarchies. Why were buffer states created around France? To promote trade with France? No. To spread nationalism? No. To prevent future French expansion? Yes. Buffer states were created around France to act as protective barriers and prevent future French expansion. Example, Kingdom of Netherlands including Belgium in the north, Geneva added to the Piedmont in the south. These states surrounded France and helped maintain peace in Europe. Which territory was added to Piedmont to strengthen it against France? The territory that was added to Piedmont to strengthen it against France was, I think, Saxony. Correct answer, Genova. Why? According to the Treaty of Vienna 1815, Genova was added to Piedmont. This was done to strengthen Piedmont and create a buffer state against France. So the correct answer was Genova. The Piedmont to strengthen France, the Piedmont was added to Genova. And north of France, Kingdom of Netherlands including Belgium was added, and in south of France, Genova added to Piedmont. Which country received northern Italy after the Congress of Vienna? Northern Italy was obtained by, I think it's Prussia. Austria. Okay, Austria got the northern Italy. According to Treaty of Vienna 1815, Austria received control of northern Italy, Russia received part of Poland, and Prussia received part of Saxony and territories on its western frontier. Austria got northern Italy, Russia got Poland, Prussia got Saxony plus western territories. Which country received part of Poland after the Congress of Vienna? Russia. After the Congress of Vienna 1815, Russia received part of Poland. This was one of the territorial changes made to reorganize Europe after Napoleon's defeat. Bourbon dynasty restored in France, Netherlands plus Belgium, buffer state in north of France, Genoa plus Piedmont, buffer state in south of France, Austria got northern Italy, Russia got part of Poland, Prussia got part of Saxony plus western territories. What happened to the German Confederation of 39 states after the Congress of Vienna? It remained unchanged. The German Confederation of 39 states created by Napoleon was left unchanged by the Congress of Vienna. The Congress restored many old monarchies, but the 39 state German Confederation continued to exist. After 1815, conservative governments imposed censorship laws mainly to control newspaper, books, plays, and songs. After 1815, conservative governments imposed censorship laws to control newspapers, books, plays, songs. They wanted to stop the spread of ideas such as liberty, nationalism, freedom, which were associated with the French Revolution. The cartoon, The Club of Thinkers, was a criticism of censorship and suppression of free speech. The cartoon, The Club of Thinkers, mocked the censorship policies of conservative governments. In the cartoon, members wear muzzles over the mouths. Rules emphasize silence. It symbolizes the suppression of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. What did conservative governments fear the most? Spread of ideas of liberty and nationalism. Conservative governments feared the spread of liberty, nationalism, democracy, ideas of French Revolution. They believed these ideas could challenge monarchies and the existing social order. What was one of the major demands of liberal nationalists after 1815? Restoration of feudalism, freedom of press, more censorship laws, absolute monarchy. They wanted freedom of the press. One of the biggest demands of liberal nationalists after 1815 was freedom of press. They wanted the right to express opinions freely, newspapers to publish without government censorship, the spread of ideas of liberty and nationalism. Which of the following was accepted by most conservatives? Complete return to pre-revolutionary society, abolition of feudalism and serfdom, universal suffrage, freedom of the press. Accepted by most conservatives. Complete return to pre-revolutionary society was not accepted. Abolition of feudalism and serfdom was accepted. Universal suffrage was not accepted. Freedom of press was not accepted. So abolition of feudalism and serfdom. Most conservatives accepted some modern reforms because they believed these would strengthen monarchies. They accepted abolition of feudalism, abolition of serfdom, modern army, efficient bureaucracy, dynamic economy, but they did not support universal suffrage, freedom of the press, complete political freedom. Match which of the following currently matches the person with his role? Napoleon, host of Congress of Vienna, Metternich, Austrian Chancellor and host of Congress of Vienna. Metternich is the correct. Mazzini, founder of Solvary, no. Bismarck, host of Congress of Vienna, no. Metternich was the person who hosted Congress of Vienna, B. So Duke Metternich was Austrian Chancellor, host of the Congress of Vienna 1815, chief architect of the conservative order in Europe. B. Metternich, Austrian Chancellor and the host of Congress of Vienna. Key personalities were Metternich, Austrian Chancellor, Napoleon defeated in 1815. Congress of Vienna 1815 countries: Britain, Russia, Prussia, Austria. Treaty of Vienna Bourbon dynasty restored in France. France lost annexed territories. Netherlands with Belgium created. Genoa added to the Piedmont. Austria got northern Italy. Russia got the part of Poland. Prussia got part of Saxony. German Confederation, that is 39 states, unchanged. Conservative preserve. Monarchy, church, social hierarchy, property, family. Accept modern army, efficient bureaucracy, abolition of feudalism and abolition of serfdom. After 1815, autocratic governments, censorship laws, suppression of dissent was introduced. Liberal nationalists demand freedom of the press. And here, the conservative regimes set up in 1815 were autocratic. They did not tolerate criticism and dissent and sought to curb activities that questioned the legitimacy of autocratic governments. Most of them imposed censorship laws to control what was said in newspapers, books, plays, and songs and reflected the ideas of liberty and freedom. Associated with the French Revolution. The memory of the French Revolution nonetheless continued to inspire liberals. One of the major issues taken up by liberal nationalists who criticized the new conservative order was freedom of press. The Club of Thinkers was the picture anonymous caricature dating 1820. Here, silence is the first commandment of this learned society. To avoid the eventuality whereby a member of this club may succumb to the temptation of speech, muscles will be redistributed to members upon entering. Here, people wears muscles, and silence was the first priority. This picture was called the Club of Thinkers. Now coming to the last section of this chapter, that is the revolutionaries. Coming to the revolutionary session, last session, the revolutionaries. This section explains how liberal nationalists continued their struggle after 1815 despite repression by conservative governments. Fear of repression after 1815. After the Congress of Vienna 1815, conservative governments became strict. Liberal nationalists were afraid to punishment and arrest. Many revolutionaries went underground. Okay. Repression. Government action to suppress opposition and freedom. Repression means the government action to suppress opposition and freedom. They suppress opposition and freedom. Secret societies. To continue their work, revolutionaries formed secret societies. Their purpose was train revolutionaries, spread nationalist ideas, and fight against monarchies, promote liberty and freedom. What did being a revolutionary mean? A revolutionary was someone who opposed monarchies established after the Vienna Congress, fought for liberty and freedom, wanted the creation of nation state. They believed that national unity was necessary for freedom. Cbse Nationalism. The most important revolutionary in this section is Cbse Nationalism. Basic facts. He was born in Genoa in 1805. He became the member of the secret society Carbonari. Exile of Nationalism. At the age of 26, 1831, he was sent into exile for attempting a revolution in Liguria. Exile. forced to live outside one's country. Society is founded by Mazzini, Young Italy in Marseille, founded to promote Italian unification, and Young Europe in Bern. Members included young revolutionaries from Poland, France, Italy, German states. Mazzini's ideas. Mazzini believed God intended nations to be the natural units of mankind. Italy should not remain divided into many small states and kingdoms. Italy should become one united democratic republic. He believed Italian unity is equal to Italian liberty. Influence of Mazzini. Inspired by Mazzini, secret societies were established in Germany, France, Switzerland, and Poland. His ideas spread nationalism across Europe. Why were conservatives afraid of Mazzini? Mazzini opposed monarchy, supported democratic republics, wanted nationalism unification. Why were conservatives afraid of Mazzini? Because Mazzini opposed monarchy, supported democratic republics, and wanted national unification. Because of these ideas, conservatives saw him as dangerous. Metternich views. Kelman von Metternich called Mazzini the most dangerous enemy of our social order. 1 minute revision. After 1815, fear of repression, revolutionaries went underground, secret societies formed. Revolutionary goals were oppose monarchy, fight for liberty, create nation state. Cbse Mazzini was born in 1805 Genova. He was the member of Carbonari. He was exiled in 1831. Organization formed by him was Young Italy in Marseille and Young Europe in Bern. Beliefs. Nations are natural units of mankind. Italy should be unified. Italy should become a democratic republic. Metternich on Mazzini. He said that the most dangerous enemy of our social order is Mazzini. Coming to the revolutionaries. During the years following 1815, the fear of repression drove many liberal nationalists underground. Secret societies sprang up in many European states to train revolutionaries and spread their ideas. To be revolutionary at this time meant a commitment to oppose monarchical forms that had been established after Vienna Congress and to fight for liberty and freedom. Most of these revolutionaries also saw the creation of nation states as necessary part of struggle for freedom. One such individual was the Italian revolutionary Giuseppe Mazzini. Born in Genova in 1805, he became a member of the secret society of Carbonari. As a young man of 26, he was sent into exile in 1831 for attempting revolution in Liguria. He subsequently founded two more underground societies, first Young Italy in Marseilles and then Young Europe in Bern, whose members were like-minded young men from Poland, France, Italy and the German states. Mazzini believed that God intended nations to be the natural units of mankind, so Italy could not be continued to be a patchwork of small states and kingdoms. It had to be forged into a single unified republic within wider alliance of nations. This unification alone could be the basis of Italian liberty. Following his model, secret society were set up in Germany, France, Switzerland and Poland. Mazzini's relentless opposition to monarchy and his vision of democratic republics frightened the conservatives. Metternich described him as the most dangerous enemy of our social order. And in this image, Cbse Mazzini and the founding of Young Europe in Bern, 1833. Need MCQs. After 1815, what drove many liberal nationalists underground? Fear of repression. Why? After 1815, conservative governments became strict and repressive. Many liberal nationalists feared arrest and punishment, so they went underground and worked secretly. Why were secret societies formed in many European states? To promote trade, no. To train revolutionaries and spread their ideas, yes. To support monarchies, no. To establish colonies, no. So to train revolutionaries and spread their ideas. Secret societies were formed to train revolutionaries, spread nationalist ideas, oppose monarchies established after the Congress of Vienna, fight for liberty and freedom. To be a revolutionary after 1815 meant supporting monarchies established after Vienna Congress, no. Opposing monarchies and fighting for liberty and freedom, yes. Supporting censorship laws, no. Defending autocratic governments. Defending autocratic governments, no. Opposing monarchies and fighting for liberty and freedom. Defending autocratic governments can also be an option. But at that time, it was not government, it was monarch. So we can say that B is the most probable answer. Why? A revolutionary after 1815 believed in opposing monarchies established after the Congress of Vienna, fighting for liberty and freedom, supporting the creation of nation states. Which Italian revolutionary is mentioned in this section? Giuseppe Mazzini. Why? Giuseppe Mazzini was the most famous Italian revolutionary and nationalist mentioned in this section. He was born in Genova in 1805. He was a member of Carbonari. He founded Young Italy and Young Europe. He wanted a united democratic republic of Italy. Giuseppe Mazzini was born in Genova. Cbse Mazzini was born in Genova in 1805. This is a frequently asked factual question from NCERT. Cbse Mazzini became a member in which secret society? First, he became a member of Carbonari. Why? Carbonari was a secret society. Cbse Mazzini joined the Carbonari and later became one of the most influential nationalist revolutionaries in Europe. At what age was Mazzini sent into exile for attempting a revolution in Liguria? At the age of 24. At the age of 26. Yes. At the age of 26, Giuseppe Mazzini was, that is in 1831, he was sent into exile for attempting a revolution in Liguria. 1805 born, in 26th year, that is in 1831, he was exiled to Liguria, exiled for attempting a revolution in Liguria. In which city did Mazzini found Young Italy? In Marseille. Young Europe was found in the city Bern. Giuseppe Mazzini founded Young Italy in Marseille to unite Italy into a single democratic republic. Young Italy was formed in Marseille. Young Europe was formed at Bern. Mazzini founded Young Europe in Bern. D. Why? Giuseppe Mazzini founded Young Europe in Bern. It brought together young revolutionaries from Poland, France, Italy, and German states with the goal of promoting nationalism and liberty across Europe. What was Mazzini's vision for Italy? Italy should remain divided into small states. No. Italy should become a united democratic republic. Yes. Italy should be ruled by Austria. No. Italy should be a monarchy under Metternich. No. Italy should become a united democratic republic. Mazzini believed that Italy should not remain divided into small states and kingdoms. Italy should become one united democratic republic. National unity was essential for liberty and freedom. This was the core idea behind Young Italy. According to Mazzini, nations were the natural units of mankind intended by God. See. Masini believed that God had intended nations to be the natural units of mankind. Therefore, he argued that people belonging to the same nation should be united. Divided states like Italy should become one nation. National unity will bring liberty and freedom. Inspired by Masini, secret society were set up in Germany, France, Switzerland, and Poland. Yeah. Inspired by Cbse Nationalism, secret societies were established in Germany, France, Switzerland, and Poland. Their aim was to spread nationalism, liberty, and revolutionary ideas. Who described Nationalism as the most dangerous enemy of our social order? Duke Metternich. Why? Duke Metternich called Cbse Nationalism as the most dangerous enemy of our social order. Oh, sorry. The questions were after 1815, what drove many liberal nationalists underground? Fear of repression. Why were secret societies formed in many European states? To train revolutionaries and spread their ideas. Which Italian revolutionary is mentioned in this section? Giuseppe Mazzini. Giuseppe Mazzini was born in Genova. Giuseppe Mazzini became a member of which secret society? Carbonari. At what age was Mazzini sent into exile for attempting a revolution in Liguria? 26 years. In which city did Mazzini found young Italy? Marseille. Mazzini founded Young Europe in Bern. What was Mazzini's vision for Italy? Italy should become a united democratic republic. Mazzini believed, according to Mazzini, nations were the natural units of mankind intended by God. Inspired by Mazzini, secret society were set up in Germany, France, Switzerland, and Poland. Who described Mazzini as most dangerous enemy of our social order? Duke Metternich. Which of the following is correctly matched? Young Italy, Marseille is correctly matched. Young Italy, Marseille. Carbonari was a secret society in Italy, not British political party. Young Europe was found in Bern, not Genova. Mazzini was an Italian revolutionary, not Austrian. Which sequence is correct according to NCRT? Carbonari, he attended the secret society of Carbonari and he went to exile. Then he formed Young Italy. Then he formed Young Europe. A will be the most probable answer. Yes. Carbonari Mazzini became a member of the secret society, exiled in 1831, sent into exile at the age of 26 for attempting a revolution in Liguria. Young Italy, Marseille, he founded to promote Italian unification. Then Young Europe, Bern, founded to unite young revolutionaries across Europe. Giuseppe Mazzini was born in 1805, Genova, member of Carbonari, exiled in 1834 at the age of 26. And we have successfully completed the third session of our history study vlog. Thank you all for joining my live.